Thank you very much for volunteering your time to judge at our tournament. We certainly appreciate anything that you can give us. This is a video on understanding and judging Lincoln-Douglas debate. When you volunteer your time like you are for our tournament, this is very, very important to us because you really are the final step in the teaching process. We teach our students how to construct arguments and how to communicate those arguments, but really the best way to tell how well they're learning is when they try to communicate their arguments to someone else. And so when you fill out your ballot, you will be telling all of us, the students and the coaches, how well both of us have done. Lincoln-Douglas debate is a value debate. This is a debate that asks us to measure things that typically are not measurable, such as the morality of an action or the justification of an action. Ideally, before we decide on a plan of action, we need to decide what's really important. And in any given circumstance, we might have different values which would demand different actions. So in a Lincoln-Douglas debate, we are given a resolution, a particular context, and we need to each side needs to decide on the affirmative or the negative what value would be most important, and then argue to you why those values are important. So we debate to discover the most important value so that ideally we can take that most effective action. Probably the most difficult part of Lincoln-Douglas debate is understanding the relationship between the value and the criterion. So I'm going to start off with a basketball analogy because we're all pretty familiar with that. As a team or as a coach in basketball, we have it, the ultimate goal is to reach the playoffs. And so when we ask ourselves what we want to do, we want, what is it that we want to accomplish? We want to reach the playoffs. Well, how do we do that? Well, we do that by scoring more points. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. On one side, you could score more points by throwing more free throws, more 2-point shots, or 3-point shots. But on the other hand, perhaps you can score more points by getting more rebounds, stealing the ball more often, or blocking the opponent's shots. So you could be more defensive, and that way you would acquire more points by stopping the other team from getting excessive points. So we understand that basketball relationship. Now let's go and let's move that basketball relationship and put it into Lincoln-Douglas debate. Perhaps the most difficult part about Lincoln-Douglas debate is understanding the relationship between the value and the criteria. The value is what it is that we want to achieve. In the basketball analogy, it was to get to the playoffs. The value is that intangible thing that societies strive for, that we want to reach. For instance, a debate that's going on pretty strong right now in current events is about gun control. Some people say that we need stronger gun control laws, and other people feel that that is an infringement of their rights. But let's say that we were in favor of more gun control. So the value of people who are in favor of gun control would be safety. And they would make certain arguments that if we get rid of those magazines that hold a lot of bullets, and we get rid of some of those automatic rifle things, and we put stronger wait times on gun purchases, that all of those would make people safer. And the criteria that they would be looking at based on these arguments is that whatever gives us the greatest good for the largest number of people to achieve safety is going to be good. And so our criterion would be a philosophy that basically says the greatest good for the greatest number. So that's how the arguments, the value, and the criterion relate to one another. The arguments are the arguments why we should do something, and then the criterion moves us to how those arguments help us reach our value. So let's go ahead and move that now to, let's flesh out that debate just a little bit more. Here on the affirmative side, on the left, they would value safety. Their criteria is the greatest good. And their arguments for that, we call them contentions, would be contention 1, contention 2, and maybe contention 3. But on the other side, on the negative side, they would say perhaps that no, in this gun control debate, the most important value is going to be the freedom, particularly the freedom that is granted to us by the Second Amendment. And so their arguments would support that. And their criterion would be the American ideals of democracy, of the Bill of Rights, that it's important for citizens to be armed if they're going to be protected against the government itself. So all of these would find some sort of a philosophy that would envelop those ideas and present that as a criteria to move you from the arguments to the value. So the topic that we're using at our tournament for Lincoln Douglas is resolved placing political conditions on humanitarian aid to foreign countries is unjust. So as the students analyze this topic, they have to decide what we would value when we say that it is unjust, or on the negative side, what we would value when we say it's not unjust. The students must debate both sides of the topic. There's 4 rounds at this tournament, and so they will have 2 on the affirmative and 2 on the negative. I think that's probably the best part of debate, because students learn that there are valid arguments on either side of an issue. Okay, so you're sitting in the classroom and you're waiting for the students to come in, and you're wondering what's going to happen next. Well, as the students come in, they will come over, and generally they introduce themselves to you, and they'll fill in the information on your ballot for you. They'll put it in their name, the team, the side. So that's all taken care of for you. During the debate, the students will actually time themselves. If they do not have a timer or have to borrow their opponent's timer or something, you may wish to note that on the ballot so that their coach knows that they're coming into the round unprepared. And during the debate itself, each team has a total of 3 minutes of preparation time that they can use in any combination. And they will tell you when they're starting their preparation time and when they're ending their preparation time, so that the other team can also keep track of it. During the debate, you will want to take notes on what the students are saying. You'll want to write down their value and the criterion for each side so that you'll be able to compare it as they make their arguments. You'll also want to write down the major arguments or the contentions. Students also will sometimes have subpoints, and that is supporting evidence for their contentions. In addition to writing those down, you'll want to write the response from the other team. Generally, what I like to do is have 2 pieces of paper in front of me, one for the affirmative team and one for the negative team. And when the affirmative team gets up and starts their speech, I'll have the paper's landscape, and on the left side in a column, I'll write their arguments. Then when the negative gets up to speak, I'll write the negative arguments against those. Then when the affirmative gets up and speaks, I will write the affirmative arguments, so I can just track to see who is answering which arguments. Sometimes before the round begins, students will ask you if you have a certain paradigm. Don't let them frighten you. It's okay. Just go ahead and tell them that you expect them to debate the values and the criterion to support what they have to say, and that you want to hear some clash. You just don't want to hear 2 opposite speeches, and that'll have you covered. The debate will actually begin and you will hear a 6-minute speech from the affirmative. In this speech, the student will tell you what the most important value is, what they have selected for their criterion, and supply evidence to support these claims. After this speech, the student from the negative team has 3 minutes to ask questions, to clarify the other side, and also to attempt to approve his or her own position. Typically, after questioning, the negative team will take some prep time before they begin their speech. Then when the negative begins to speak, they will actually have a 7-minute speech. It's a little longer than the affirmative. They're going to present their side. They're going to offer you an alternative value and an alternative criterion and supply evidence to support these claims. Then she or he will also respond to the arguments of the affirmative, which is why their speech is a little bit longer. They're going to start the rebuttal process right away. After this speech, the student from the affirmative team has 3 minutes to ask the negative team questions that will clarify his or her position, and also questions that can improve the affirmative position. And again, typically after questioning, the affirmative team will take some prep time before beginning. After the constructive speeches are over, the students will start with their rebuttals. In this part of the debate, students cannot create a new argument, although they may present evidence to support arguments that they have already made. The affirmative will start the rebuttals with a 4-minute speech responding to the negative case and rebuilding their own case where the negative has attacked it. Then the negative will respond to the affirmative for 6 minutes. Then finally, the affirmative responds to the negative for 3 minutes and wraps up the round. Each of these speeches should provide you with an analysis of the opponent's arguments and support for the speaker's claim of why their opponent is incorrect, weak, or faulty. So, who wins? Sometimes it's very obvious who wins the debate, and it's obvious to the students too, and those decisions are really easy to make. It's the close ones that we struggle with, and I know because for a lot of years I was the parent who came in and judged at the tournaments, and I really struggled with it. But the more I was with the kids and over the years, I have pretty well learned this. On those tough decisions, we absolutely must declare a winner. No matter which way you decide, one team will think that you are absolutely brilliant, and the other team will think that you did not listen to their most important arguments. When you're making your decision on who wins, you need to base your decision only on what the debaters actually say. It's unfair to expect the debaters to respond to arguments that you are not allowed to voice. So no matter what your opinion is on the topic, you can only respond to what they say. And if they say something that's wrong, but the other team doesn't point it out, you can't knock them off for that. It's kind of like that foul in the basketball game that the ref never sees. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to ignore it. There's many times I've written on a ballot that I question a particular argument and because it goes against everything that I have learned, and I would like to see some action, or would like to have heard some evidence to support that. And that's an important note to make, because not only does it help the team who made the claim realize that they can't just say things just because it's convenient, but it also helps the other team see where they missed the boat in their arguments. And finally, it also lets us as coaches know exactly what's going on in the round, and that's helpful for us too. So how do you decide who wins? Well, ask yourself if the claims that each team is making are well supported. Was it really clear how the evidence leads you to the criterion, to the value? Or does there seem to be some kind of a gap there? And finally, did the team respond to the other team's arguments? And this is very, very important. It's difficult to decide who wins if they only talk about their side and never tell you why the other side is wrong. Particularly if you can only use what they're actually saying in the round as a basis for your decision.